He walked through the crowded streets with eyes that never wavered, his steps steady and cold, while others glanced away, unsure why his presence made the air feel heavier than the smoke of the city itself. His boots pressed against the pavement with an unshaken rhythm, a sound that carried more weight than the chatter of the vendors or the hum of traffic around him. He was a man who did not bend, and people could sense it without needing to hear a single word. The city was alive with sound, and yet every space he entered felt quieter, as though the noise dared not come too close. He passed stalls overflowing with cheap trinkets and counterfeit perfumes. The smell of frying food mixing with gasoline and dust. Neon signs flickered above, in pale colors that could not quite wash away the darkness lurking behind the alleys. People sold promises of fortune or escape on every corner, but none of it seemed to touch him. He carried an aura that separated him from all of the children, tugged at the sleeves of their parents, pointing at the figure and the hulking shadow that trailed beside him. The parents pulled them back with hurried whispers and turned their faces away, for they had heard the stories too, and whether true or not, the weight of rumor was enough to keep them distant. Some claimed he had been a soldier who never returned from the battlefield. Others said he had lost everything in a fire and only walked because death had somehow forgotten him. Whatever the truth, none dared to ask. His clothes were plain, dark and worn, yet on him they seemed like a uniform stitched with resolve. His hands were calloused, his jaw sharp with lines carved from years of silence and endurance. His eyes were not wild, but they were not kind either. They were the sort of eyes that remembered more than most could bear to imagine, eyes that held both storms and emptiness at once. He moved through the world with the certainty of someone who had already faced the worst it had to offer and found nothing left to fear beside him. The beast followed its head, lo, its body a living shadow that drew every gaze, even when people tried not to stare. Its fur bore scars. Its muscles moved like coiled cables. Its growl was not loud, but deep enough to vibrate in the chest of anyone too close. There was no leash in the ordinary sense, just a chain that seemed more symbolic than necessary, for the beast looked not restrained but loyal, bound not by steel but by something The man stopped, the beast stopped. When the man turned, the beast turned. When the man breathed, the beast breathed with him. And in that synchronicity there was a power that unsettled even the bravest onlookers. It was as if the animal was not simply trained but woven into the very fabric of the man's being. Together they formed a presence that the city recognized, even if it could not name it. As he moved on through the market and down the narrow veins of the old streets, the whispers followed, like shadows blending with the smoke and the flickering lights. He never looked back, and he never slowed, because he knew fear did not live in him anymore, and those who watched from the distance understood that whatever he carried within him was stronger than fear itself. Rumors followed him everywhere, not just whispers of curiosity, but tales shaped by fear and fascination, stories that grew larger each time they passed from one mouth to another. They said he had once been a family man with a wife and a daughter, a small life hidden in a quiet neighborhood where laughter could still be heard through cracked windows, but all of that was gone, now replaced by a silence no one dared to break, because the fire had taken everything except him and the beast. The night of the fire was spoken of as though it were myth. Neighbors claimed they had seen him stagger from the flames with skin burned and eyes hollow, his arms carrying the blackened form of the dog pulled from the smoke. When every sane man would have run from the collapsing walls, others swore they saw him screaming at the sky with the weight of his loss tearing through his chest, while the beast lay trembling on the ground, covered in soot and scars. Whatever truth existed was buried in ash and silence. In the years that followed, he became a shadow among people moving through the city, without roots or attachments. He never spoke of the fire, and he never spoke of the ones he lost, but the beast at his side told the story without words, its scarred face a constant reminder of what had been taken and what had survived. The dog was no ordinary animal. It carried an edge to its movements, a restlessness that made others uneasy, and a loyalty so sharp it seemed more human than beast. Some said the man had trained it to kill, others insisted the fire itself had burned away its gentleness, leaving only raw fury inside, and that it listened to him alone, as if his grief and the dog's survival had bound them together in a pact no one could understand. People who saw the beast never forgot it. They remembered the way its eyes seemed to glow in the dim light, the way its teeth flashed like shards of glass, and the way silence spread whenever it walked beside him. Lived nowhere and everywhere, drifting through the city like smoke, sleeping in abandoned buildings or on rooftops, walking for hours with no clear destination. The beast, never leaving his side, he worked odd jobs when he needed money, unloading trucks, at the docks lifting steel on construction sites, men twice his size giving him space, not out of respect but out of unease, because they could see that he carried something heavier than any bafta or beam. The fire had burned away his fear and left only resolve, and it was this that unsettled people the most. A man who has nothing left cannot be threatened, and a beast that has already faced the flames cannot be tamed. Together they were a living warning, a reminder that some losses do not break people, they forge them into something harder, something that others cannot understand but instinctively avoid. Every street he walked became a stage for whispers, some voices pitying him, others condemning him as dangerous. They wondered why he still walked when he should have been buried with his family. They wondered why the beast stayed when it could have vanished into the wild. The truth none of them could admit was that both man and beast walked because they had nowhere else to go, and nothing else to cling to but each other. And so the city came to know them not as survivors, but as omens, a man marked by fire and a beast scarred by fate. And wherever they went the air grew heavier, and the whispers followed because rumors of a way of growing when fed by silence, and his silence was endless. That dog was no pet, it was a force chained to his side, muscles tense and coiled like steel cables. Beneath scarred skin, its breath rising in short, steady bursts that sounded almost mechanical. People who dared to look saw more than an animal. They saw something closer to a weapon, something created by pain and fire, and sharpened by survival. Its eyes burned with a restless energy, a glow that reflected every flicker of light in the city as if it carried its own inner fire. The man never called it by name, at least not where others could hear. Some swore he had given it a name, whispered only in the quiet hours of the night when the streets were empty and the world was still. But to everyone else it was simply the beast, a shadow that obeyed his every move without hesitation. When he stopped it froze, when he advanced it surged forward, when he breathed the beast seemed to breathe with him. He never needed to raise his voice, never needed to yank the chain. The bond between them was so tight that a glance or a subtle shift of weight carried more command than words, and people who saw this swore that the beast could understand his thoughts directly, as if the man had poured all his grief and rage into the creature until it became an extension of himself, no longer separate but one being split into flesh and fur. The chain that linked them rattled softly with each step, yet it was not the kind of leash seen in parks or markets. It was heavy, forged iron, worn and blackened as though it had been pulled from fire. Like them, it was not meant to restrain but to remind, a symbol of the bond and of the violence that could be unleashed with the smallest signal. When the chain clinked, men grew nervous, women pulled children away, and those foolish enough to laugh at first found their throats dry. Before the sound reached its end, people who had seen the beast fight said it moved faster than the eye could follow, tearing into anything that threatened its master with a savagery that looked less like training and more like destiny. Yet the strange thing was that it never struck without his command. It waited, trembling eyes locked on him every time, as if begging for the order, and in that waiting there was a tension stronger than the attack itself, a reminder that danger was always one word away. He walked through neighborhoods where gangs prowled, and even they stayed back, muttering curses, but never daring to step too close, for they had seen what the beast could do. They had seen the scars left on brick walls and broken wood from jaws that did not know mercy. The man himself never boasted, never threatened, never showed aggression. He simply walked, and that was enough for most to step aside at night. When the city sank into shadows, he and the beast moved like one silhouette against the dim lights, the man calm and steady, the beast restless and watching, and together they created a presence that people could not ignore. Some swore they saw the dog smile in its own grim way, teeth flashing in the dark as though it knew the fear it inspired and fed on it. The beast was not just his companion, it was his shield, his weapon, his warning, and though many whispered of curses and demons, the truth was far simpler. The beast was survival itself, born from fire and bound to him until the end. Children hid behind their parents when the man passed through the markets, their small hands clutching fabric with wide eyes staring at the hulking shadow. Beside him, the beast never barked, never lunged, yet its silence was somehow worse than noise, its presence like a storm on the horizon, heavy and weighting. The parents pulled their children back, whispering warnings that carried the weight of rumor more than truth, yet no one dared to test whether rumor was enough. The city gave them space. Every alley seemed to open when they walked through, every crowd seemed to part as if carried by instinct. People avoided eye contact because the eyes of the man and the eyes of the beast mirrored each other too closely, both sharp, both unflinching, both speaking of fire and loss without saying a word. Even those who had never seen them before could sense it, a chill that touched the spine and urged the body to move. Aside, shopkeepers watched from doorways, gripping their counters tightly when the chain rattled, as if the sound might be followed by teeth tearing into flesh. They muttered stories about curses and demons to customers as soon as the man was gone, saying he had traded his soul to save the beast, saying the animal was no longer natural but bound to him by something darker. These tales spread through the streets, changing shape with each telling, until the man was no longer a man but a legend of fear. The legend grew not because of what he did but because of what he did not do. He did not smile, he did not speak, he did not ask for help or company. His silence was a canvas, and people painted their fears onto it. Some said he had once set the fire himself to erase his past, others believed he had been a soldier who returned home to broken to live among others, and the beast was his only surviving brother in arms. Those who laughed at the stories found themselves unsettled when he passed, because the beast was not fiction. Its growl was real, its scars were real, and its stare was real, and when combined with the emptiness in the man's eyes, no tales seemed too far-fetched. After all, there were nights when strange noises echoed in alleys after they passed, nights when stray dogs vanished, nights when men who had tried to follow were found beaten, broken, and unable to explain what had happened. Still, he never looked for trouble. He simply walked his path without hesitation, and the city bent itself around him like water around a stone. People feared him, not because he attacked but because they knew he could, and perhaps because they knew he would not hesitate if forced. His presence was a warning written into the rhythm of the streets, an unspoken law that everyone obeyed without needing to see it written. He and the beast were not outsiders, they were part of the city as much as the bricks and shadows. They had become woven into its fabric, a living myth that shaped how people moved and how they spoke, and though no one dared approach him too closely, everyone understood one thing: when he passed by they felt the truth in their bones, that fear itself had already been defeated in him, and that made him more dangerous than any man alive. One night the city felt different, the air heavy, with heat and smoke drifting from the factories, the alleys alive with the echoes of laughter sharp and mocking. It was in one of these alleys that the man found himself, blocked his path, sealed by a group of young men who had drunk too much and feared too little. They leaned against the brick walls with broken bottles in their hands and cruel grins on their faces. The beast shifted at his side, low growls rising from its chest like thunder rolling beneath the earth. The iron chain clinked with each movement, a sound that drew the attention of the gang, but rather than retreating, they laughed louder, pointing at the scarred animal as if daring it to move. One of them spat on the ground and said, "This is the beast we have heard about. This is the monster people whisper about. Looks more like a stray dog with mange." The man stood silent, his eyes steady, his shoulders squared, his breath calm. He did not move forward and he did not step back. He simply existed in the narrow alley, as if the weight of his presence alone was enough to challenge them. But the gang wanted more. They wanted fear, and they would not leave until they saw it. Another voice called out, asking if the beast knew tricks. Maybe it could roll over, maybe it could beg for scraps. The laughter echoed against the walls, but the beast did not flinch, its body rigid, its gaze locked on its master, waiting for the smallest signal. The chain trembled between them like a live wire. The gang noticed the tension and tried to use it. One of them stepped forward, dragging his bottle across the wall, letting the glass screech against the brick, a sound meant to provoke, meant to push the man into breaking the silence. Still, he did not move. His eyes never left theirs. His calmness unnerved them, though they tried to hide it behind smirks. Their voices grew louder, sharper, trying to mask the unease creeping into their laughter. One of them called out, "Do you think we are afraid of a burned mutt and a broken man?" He raised his bottle high as if to throw it. The beast lunged against the chain, the sound of its growl exploding through the alley so deep it rattled in their chests. The man held the chain firm without speaking, without blinking, his stillness more terrifying than the sudden violence of the animal. In that instant the gang realized that the power did not come from the beast alone, it came from the bond between man and beast, from the fact that one word could end them before the bottle even touched the ground. The alley grew silent, the bottle lowered, the laughter faded into uneasy murmurs, yet the man said nothing. He simply remained there, a wall of calm in a storm of fear. The gang exchanged glances, their bravado crumbling under the weight of something they could not explain. The silence spoke louder than any threat, and for the first time their eyes wavered. The beast continued to snarl, the chain straining like it wanted to break free. But it did not move without command, and that waiting was worse than attack, because it promised devastation. At the smallest signal, the gang began to step back, their jokes fading into whispers, their courage dissolving into the shadows, and the man finally moved, not toward them but forward, through them, each step slow, deliberate, and unafraid. The beast snarled, low and guttural, its chest vibrating with a sound that echoed off the walls of the narrow alley. The chain rattled in the man's hand, each link tense with restrained violence. The gang of young men still stood before him, though their laughter had thinned into nervous smirks, their eyes darting between the scarred dog and the unflinching figure who held it. One of them stepped forward, trying to hide his fear behind swagger. He lifted his chin and waved his broken bottle, as if it were a sword, the glass glinting in the dim streetlight. He said, words meant to provoke, words meant to test the man's silence. The others cheered half-heartedly, but their voices trembled. They had seen something in the eyes of the beast, something that promised blood. If the chain slipped even for a second, the man did not answer. His breath slow, his shoulders steady, his gaze sharp enough to cut through the false bravado of the group. The beast pressed forward, muscles quivering, teeth bared, saliva dripping from its jaws, as though it could already taste the fight waiting to be unleashed. The gang leader sneered and took another step, daring the man to let go. That moment the air felt different, heavy, suffocating, like the pause before a storm. The gang had thought they were hunters cornering prey, but now they felt the weight of their mistake pressing against them, their nerves unraveling one by one. The silence of the man was louder than any shout, and the fury of the beast was more honest than any of their threats. Another tried to speak, to laugh, to break the tension, but the sound cracked in his throat. He looked at the others but saw no strength, their only faces pale and stiff with unease. The growl of the beast grew louder, filling the alley, until it was the only sound that existed, drowning out their voices, drowning out even their own hearts. The leader lifted his bottle higher, hand shaking despite his grin. The man did not move, but the beast lunged forward with sudden force. The chain snapped, taut, the sound of iron against stone ringing like a warning bell. The bottle wavered in the leader's grip, his grin vanished, and his feet stumbled back. The rest of the gang pulled away, their courage collapsing into the shadows that surrounded them. The man stood unmoving, not a word leaving his mouth, not a flicker of expression crossing his face. His stillness was the command. The beast obeyed, waiting, trembling on the edge of chaos. The gang understood now that one word, one simple signal would be enough to end them. None of their weapons, none of their numbers would matter there. Laughter was gone, replaced by shallow breaths, their bravado scattered like dust in the wind. They looked at each other, seeking courage but finding only fear, and in that moment the alley belonged to the man and his beast. It was their ground, their silence, their power, and the gang could only feel the truth pressing into them. They had never faced a man who carried no fear, and they never wanted to again. But he did not flinch. His gaze remained locked upon them, his stillness more dangerous than motion, his silence more terrifying than a threat. The beast trembled at his side, its muscles straining, its claws scraping the concrete with a rhythm like a drumbeat, announcing the violence that waited just beyond command. The gang thought they had cornered a man, but now they realized they had trapped themselves inside an alley with something they could not control. The leader tried to laugh, but the sound broke, jagged and hollow. He raised the bottle again, though his hand betrayed him with a tremor that rattled glass against brick. His eyes flicked to the beast, then to the man, hoping for some sign of hesitation, but there was none. Only that same calm face, carved with lines of loss and resolve, a mask that revealed nothing and promised everything. The silence pressed into the leader like a weight he could not carry. One of the younger boys whispered to him, "We should go," but the leader shoved him back, forcing a grin that did not reach his eyes. He said words meant to restore courage, but they fell flat against the growl that filled the air, each syllable drowned before it left his lips. The others shifted uneasily, feet scraping against the ground as though their bodies were already preparing to flee, even if their pride refused to allow it. The beast lunged again, the chain pulled taut. The man did not speak, but his grip tightened enough to hold the creature in place. Yet his eyes told the gang everything they needed to know. If he wanted to, he would let it go. If he wished, he could end them in seconds, and he would not blink. Doing it, the unspoken truth filled the alley, the knowledge that they had no power here, no advantage, no escape except retreat. The leader tried to shout, but his voice cracked, his bravado bleeding away. The beast snapped its jaws together with a sound sharp as steel, cutting through the night. The gang jolted backward. One of them stumbled against the wall, his bottle slipping from his hand and shattering. into pieces that glittered across the ground like scattered teeth. The sound echoed and faded, leaving only the growl that never stopped still. The man did not move, he simply stood, as if carved from stone, the beast his shadow, alive with fury, waiting to be given to the night. The silence stretched long enough that the gang began to feel madness in it. Each second without motion, each second without words, filled them with the dread of what might come. If the waiting ended, the silence itself became the punishment. The leader dropped his grin at last, his shoulders slumped, his bottle lowered, and he muttered something no one could hear. Before stepping back, his gang followed. His retreat, their courage gone, their faces pale and slick with sweat, they left in fragments, one after another, dissolving into the shadows from which they had come, until only the man and the beast remained on. When the last echo of their footsteps vanished, he still did not move, his calm gaze lifted only slightly, as the beasts pressed against the chain, waiting, hungry for a command that never came. The alley remained heavy with what could have been, but the man walked forward, his silence carrying more power than violence itself. The men began to shift unease, crawling through their bodies, like cold water in the night, their bravado crumbling, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the truth of their fear. The alley that had once echoed with their laughter now held only the sound of shallow breathing, and the constant growl of the beast. The iron chain trembled with every movement, as if even metal struggled to contain the weight of what was waiting to be unleashed. The leader lowered his bottle at last, his fingers loosening as though the glass burned his hand. His eyes no longer searched for victory but for escape. He glanced at the others, hoping to find strength in their faces, but all he saw was panic, pale skin, wide eyes, and clenched jaws, every one of them already broken by the silence of the man and the fury of the beasts. Man did not move. He let the silence stretch like a blade drawn slowly across the skin. He understood the power of waiting. He understood that fear was most dangerous when it was left to grow inside the mind. He stood calm, his grip steady, the beast vibrating beside him like a storm caught on a chain, its snarl reverberating through the bricks and through the bones of the men who stood too close. One of them turned first, his shoes scraping against the concrete as he stumbled back into the shadows. Another followed, muttering a curse that cracked in his throat. The leader tried to hold his ground for another breath, but when the beast snapped its jaws together with a sound sharp and final, he retreated, his pride broken with every step. The rest scattered behind him, their voices swallowed by the dark corners of the alley. The man and the beast remained alone, the silence even heavier now that the noise of bravado had fled. He looked down at the beast, its eyes blazing, still locked on the direction of the retreat, its chest rising and falling with the rhythm of restrained violence. But he did not speak, he gave no command. He simply began to walk forward, the chain dragging softly against the ground like the echo of a warning that would never fade. As they left the alley, the city seemed to breathe again, lights flickering, shadows shifting, sounds returning, but whispers were already beginning. They spread from mouths that had not even witnessed the moment, for news traveled fast in streets that thrived on rumor. Some said the beast nearly tore men apart, others swore the man had stared them into surrender. No two stories matched, yet all carried the same truth. Do not cross him, do not test the bond between the man and his beast. By the time he reached the end of the street, eyes were already watching from windows and doorways, faces peering through curtains and shutters. People would remember this night even if they had not seen it. They would speak of it tomorrow and the day after, until the alley itself became part of the legend. His silence had spoken louder than violence, and the city had heard it. Clearly the beast walked at his side, calm once more, its fury caged by the unspoken command of its master. Together they moved on their shadows, long beneath the dim lights, each step a reminder that some men and some creatures carry storms within them, and that, to awaken those storms, is to invite an ending. He walked away, the beast beside him, each step slow, deliberate, and unbroken. The echoes of their passage stretching behind them like a trail of silence. The city around them stirred with whispers, but none dared to speak loud enough for him to hear. Doors closed as he passed, windows flickered with movement, shadows retreating as though the very streets recognized that he carried something no law, no gang, no weapon could challenge. The beast padded at his side, its body relaxed but its eyes still burning, watching every corner, every face that dared to look too long. Its chain swayed lightly between them, no longer straining, no longer rattling like a warning. Now it was simply there, a symbol of power kept in balance by a man who had learned to master not only the creature but also himself. Their bond was not of ownership but of survival, forged in flame and grief. Tempered by silence, the gang would speak of that night with twisted words. They would not admit their fear, but it would cling to their voices every time they tried to tell the story one would claim. The beast had almost torn the leader apart. Another would swear the man had spoken a single word that froze them in place, even though none remembered hearing it. The truth mattered less than the weight of the legend that now grew with every retelling in markets and taverns. The story spread, told by those who had seen, and those who had not. The man with no fear, the beast scarred by fire, the chain that was more than metal. Together they became myth, walking through the city as living omens, and even those who had never crossed their path learned to step aside when they thought they heard the faint rattle of iron on stone. The man did not chase fame, and he did not seek fear. He wanted nothing from the city. He moved through it like water through cracked stone, unhurried, unbroken. Always forward. He carried no possessions except the chain and the weight of his past. His silence was his weapon, and his shield the beast, his shadow and his warning, and together they needed nothing else. He stopped once, beneath the dim light of a street lamp, the glow pale against the scars that lined the beast's body. He reached down, resting his hand on its head. The creature calmed instantly, its growl fading into steady breath, its eyes softening for a moment no one else could see. In that moment, the man was no legend, no weapon, no omen. He was simply a survivor, who had lost everything yet chosen to keep walking with the only soul that understood his pain. Then he moved again, and the night swallowed him whole, his figure and the beast, dissolving into the darkness of the city alleys like they had never been there at all. Yet the silence they left behind lingered long after their shadows were gone. The city would remember, because fear fades but legend grows, and he had become more than a man. He had become the reminder that some beings cannot be broken. So he walked on, unafraid, his beast at his side, the chain swaying softly with every step, each link a promise that one command was all it would take to end whatever stood in their path.